The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training facility as Sarah Chun stepped out of the transport vehicle, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder. The concrete buildings stretched before her like a fortress of dreams and nightmares, each one designed to break down ordinary soldiers and rebuild them into something extraordinary. She had fought tooth and nail to get here, enduring months of physical conditioning, psychological evaluations, and weapons testing just to earn the right to attempt sniper school. Sarah had always been different from other soldiers in her unit. While her fellow Marines celebrated their acceptance letters with loud cheers and boastful predictions of success, she had simply nodded when her commanding officer handed her the paperwork. Her quiet confidence had been mistaken for arrogance by some, uncertainty by others. The truth was simpler and more complex than either assumption. Sarah knew exactly what she was walking into, and she knew exactly what she was capable of achieving. The rifle case in her left hand contained more than just a precision weapon. Inside lay a custom-built instrument that had taken her 3 years to perfect, each component selected and modified with the kind of obsessive attention to detail that separated true marksmen from weekend enthusiasts. The stock bore markings that most people would dismiss as decorative engravings, but those symbols told a story that stretched back through generations of her family. As she approached the registration building, Sarah noticed the stares from other recruits. Some looked curious, others skeptical. A few seemed openly hostile. She had expected this reaction. In a program that historically graduated fewer than 30% of its participants, every other recruit was potential competition. The fact that she was one of only 3 women in a class of 47 made her an even more obvious target for scrutiny. The registration process moved with military efficiency. Name, rank, serial number, emergency contact information, medical clearances, and equipment inspection. When Sarah placed her rifle case on the inspection table, the sergeant examining equipment paused. His weathered hands moved over the case with practiced familiarity, checking dimensions and weight distribution before opening the latches. The weapon inside gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Every surface had been cleaned and maintained to perfection, from the barrel to the scope mounts. But it was the stock that drew the sergeant's attention. Carved into the dark wood were symbols that looked almost like traditional military insignia, but with subtle differences that marked them as something else entirely. "Interesting markings, recruit," the sergeant said, his voice neutral but his eyes curious. "Family heirloom?" "Something like that, Sergeant," Sarah replied, maintaining eye contact without being aggressive about it. The sergeant nodded and made a note on his clipboard before closing the case. "You'll be in Barracks C, Bunk 14. Orientation begins at 0600 tomorrow. Don't be late." Sarah found her assigned bunk and began the process of settling into what would be her home for the next 12 weeks, assuming she lasted that long. The barracks were spartanly furnished, but clean, with narrow beds and metal lockers that could hold everything a recruit was allowed to possess during training. She methodically unpacked her gear, placing each item in its designated location with the kind of precision that had become second nature over years of military service. Her bunkmate arrived an hour later, a tall man from Texas who introduced himself as Rodriguez and immediately began regaling anyone within earshot with stories of his hunting expeditions and shooting competitions. Sarah listened politely while organizing her personal items, noting the way Rodriguez's eyes kept drifting to her rifle case with poorly concealed skepticism. "So what's your story?" Rodriguez asked eventually, settling onto his own bunk with a casualness that suggested he was already comfortable in any environment. "You actually think you can hack it here?" Sarah finished arranging her uniforms before answering. "I think we'll all find out together over the next few months." The diplomatic response seemed to satisfy Rodriguez, who launched into another hunting story involving a particularly challenging shot he had made during deer season. Sarah nodded at appropriate intervals while privately calculating the ballistic factors involved in the scenario he described. His story was impressive, but contained several details that suggested embellishment or misunderstanding of the actual physics involved. That evening, the entire class gathered in the main briefing room for their first official introduction to the program. The instructor who entered wore no visible rank insignia, but his bearing and the immediate silence that fell over the room indicated someone with significant authority. He was perhaps 50 years old, with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that came from decades of outdoor operations. "Welcome to Sniper School," the instructor began, his voice carrying easily to every corner of the room without seeming raised. "My name is Master Sergeant Thompson, and for the next 12 weeks, I will be responsible for determining whether any of you possess the skills, discipline, and mental fortitude necessary to become precision marksmen in service of your country." Thompson began pacing slowly across the front of the room, his eyes scanning the faces before him with the intensity of someone cataloging every detail for future reference. "Look around you. 47 recruits started this program. Historical data suggests that fewer than 15 of you will graduate. Some of you will fail because you lack the physical capabilities required. Others will fail because you cannot master the technical aspects of long-range shooting. Most of you will fail because you discover that you lack the psychological makeup necessary to perform under the extreme stress conditions you will face as operational snipers." The room remained perfectly silent as Thompson continued his assessment. "This program will test every aspect of your abilities as soldiers and as human beings. You will be required to demonstrate proficiency in mathematics, physics, meteorology, camouflage, stalking, observation, and marksmanship under conditions designed to replicate the worst possible scenarios you might encounter in combat situations." Sarah found herself studying not just Thompson's words, but his delivery and body language. Everything about his presentation suggested someone who had personally experienced every challenge he was describing. The way he held himself, the careful modulation of his voice, even his choice of which recruits to make eye contact with during specific portions of his speech indicated levels of tactical awareness that went far beyond classroom instruction. "Your first evaluation will begin tomorrow morning at 0500 hours, Thompson announced. "You will be tested on your current shooting abilities using the weapons you brought with you. This assessment will establish baseline performance metrics and identify candidates who may require additional foundational training before proceeding with advanced instruction." As the briefing concluded and recruits began filing out of the room, Sarah noticed Thompson's eyes following her movement toward the exit. The attention felt different from the casual observation he had given other students. There was something more focused about it, as though he had already identified her as someone requiring special consideration. Back in the barracks, the atmosphere buzzed with nervous energy as recruits discussed the upcoming evaluation. Conversations ranged from confident predictions of success to barely concealed anxiety about meeting minimum standards. Sarah participated minimally in these discussions, preferring to review her equipment and mentally prepare for what lay ahead. Rodriguez had found a group of like-minded recruits and was holding court near the center of the barracks, regaling them with increasingly elaborate stories about his shooting prowess. His audience seemed genuinely impressed, though Sarah noticed that his technical descriptions became vaguer as his tales grew more dramatic. "What about you, Chun?" Rodriguez called out, apparently noticing her relative isolation. "You got any impressive shooting stories to share with the group?" All conversation in the immediate area stopped as attention focused on Sarah. She looked up from the maintenance manual she had been reviewing, aware that her response would likely set the tone for how she would be perceived by her fellow recruits for the remainder of the program. "I prefer to let my shooting speak for itself," she replied simply, returning her attention to the manual. The response drew mixed reactions. Some recruits nodded approvingly at what they interpreted as professional humility. Others exchanged glances that suggested they viewed her answer as either arrogance or uncertainty disguised as mystery. Rodriguez's expression indicated he wasn't sure which interpretation to apply. As lights out approached, Sarah completed her evening equipment checks and personal preparations for the following day. Every piece of gear was cleaned, inspected, and positioned for maximum efficiency during the morning evaluation. Her rifle received particular attention, each component verified for proper function and optimal adjustment. The markings on the weapon stock caught the light from the overhead bulbs, their carved surfaces creating subtle shadows that seemed to shift as Sarah moved the rifle during her inspection routine. The symbols were more than decorative elements or family traditions. They represented a legacy of precision and dedication that stretched back through multiple generations of her family, each mark corresponding to specific achievements and milestones that few people would recognize or understand. Sleep came easily despite the anticipatory tension filling the barracks. Sarah had learned years ago to compartmentalize stress and anxiety, filing away concerns about future events until they became immediate realities requiring her attention. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight required only rest and mental preparation. The pre-dawn wake-up call came precisely at 0430, allowing 30 minutes for personal preparation before the evaluation began. Sarah moved through her morning routine with practiced efficiency, noting that several recruits appeared nervous or disoriented by the early hour and immediate pressure. She had been waking before dawn for training purposes since childhood, making the schedule adjustment minimal. The shooting range stretched across several hundred yards of carefully maintained terrain, with targets positioned at various distances and elevations to test different aspects of marksmanship ability. Shooting stations were equipped with standardized rests and measurement equipment, though recruits would be using their personal weapons for the evaluation. Master Sergeant Thompson appeared at precisely 0500, accompanied by several assistant instructors who began calling recruits to their assigned shooting positions. The evaluation would proceed in groups of 5, with each marksman required to engage targets at 200, 400, and 600 yards under time constraints that would reveal both accuracy and speed capabilities. Sarah's group was called Third, giving her time to observe the performance of recruits who preceded her. Most demonstrated competent basic marksmanship skills, though few showed the kind of exceptional precision that would be required for advanced sniper operations. Several recruits struggled with the longer-range targets, their shots grouping poorly or missing entirely due to inadequate compensation for wind conditions and ballistic drop. Rodriguez performed respectably, achieving solid hits at all 3 distances, though without the tight groupings that would indicate exceptional ability. His shooting was competent, but unremarkable, the kind of performance that would pass minimum standards without distinguishing him from the majority of other recruits. When Sarah's name was called, she approached her assigned shooting position with the same calm efficiency she brought to all tasks. Her rifle was configured and ready within seconds of arriving at the station, the weapon settling into her shoulder with the familiarity of countless hours of practice and refinement. The first series of shots at 200 yards produced a grouping that could have been covered by a quarter. The assistant instructor checking targets radioed back measurements that caused Thompson to look up from his clipboard with interest. Similar precision followed at 400 yards, then 600, each group demonstrating not just accuracy, but consistency that exceeded the performance of any recruit tested so far that morning. But it was during the 600-yard shooting that something unusual occurred. Sarah's final shot, taken in conditions with gusting crosswinds that had challenged every previous marksman, found the exact center of the target with an impact that seemed to defy the environmental factors affecting the range. The assistant instructor spent several minutes confirming the target before radioing back results that caused Thompson to walk personally to the shooting position. "Outstanding shooting, recruit," Thompson said, his tone carefully neutral despite obvious interest in what he had observed. "Your weapon appears to be exceptionally well configured for precision work." "Thank you, Master Sergeant," Sarah replied, beginning to pack her equipment with the same methodical approach she applied to all tasks. Thompson's eyes moved to the rifle stock, noting the carved markings that had caught attention during equipment inspection. "Those symbols on your weapon, they appear to be more than decorative elements." Sarah paused in her packing, recognizing that her answer might determine how she would be perceived and treated for the remainder of the program. They represent family traditions related to marksmanship, Master Sergeant. Family traditions, Thompson repeated, his voice carrying subtle undertones that suggested deeper understanding than his words indicated. Perhaps we should discuss those traditions in more detail. Report to my office after evening chow. As Sarah completed packing her gear and prepared to leave the range, she was aware of conversations among other recruits regarding her performance. Some expressed genuine admiration for shooting that clearly exceeded their own capabilities. Others seemed to view her results with suspicion or resentment, as though exceptional performance somehow diminished their own prospects for success. Rodriguez approached as she finished securing her rifle case. "That was some impressive shooting out there," he said, his tone carrying undertones that suggested mixed feelings about her performance. "You've been shooting long?" "Most of my life," Sarah replied honestly, recognizing that attempting to downplay her abilities would only create more questions and speculation. "Well, you definitely got Thompson's attention," Rodriguez continued. "Not sure if that's good or bad in a place like this." Sarah considered his observation while walking back toward the barracks. In her experience, exceptional performance typically generated both opportunities and challenges, often simultaneously. Thompson's request for a private meeting could indicate recognition of potential that might accelerate her training, or it could suggest concerns about her background and capabilities that required investigation. The remainder of the day proceeded with classroom instruction covering basic ballistic principles, weather analysis, and equipment maintenance protocols. Sarah found most of the material familiar, though she noted several techniques and calculation methods that differed from her personal approach to long-range shooting. Some of these differences appeared to represent simplified versions of more complex procedures, while others seemed to reflect military standardization of practices that might be refined through individual experience and experimentation. During afternoon physical training, the class was subjected to endurance tests designed to evaluate cardiovascular fitness and mental resilience under stress conditions. Sarah performed well, but not exceptionally, maintaining pace with the stronger recruits without distinguishing herself significantly from the group average. She had learned that demonstrating overwhelming superiority in multiple areas simultaneously could create more problems than it solved. Evening chow provided the first opportunity for extended informal interaction among recruits. Sarah found herself included in several conversations, though she noticed that her shooting performance that morning had altered the social dynamics within the group. Some recruits seemed eager to associate with someone who had demonstrated exceptional capabilities, while others appeared to view her as competition to be assessed and potentially undermined. The meeting with Master Sergeant Thompson was scheduled for 2000 hours, giving Sarah time to clean up and prepare for what might be a significant conversation regarding her future in the program. She arrived at the designated office precisely on time, finding Thompson seated behind a desk covered with personnel files and training documentation. "Close the door and have a seat, Chun," Thompson instructed, gesturing toward a chair positioned across from his desk. "We need to discuss your background and those markings on your rifle." Sarah settled into the indicated chair, maintaining a relaxed but attentive posture that conveyed respect without defensiveness. "What would you like to know, Master Sergeant?" Thompson opened a file folder and reviewed several pages before responding. "Your personnel records indicate exceptional performance in basic training and advanced infantry school, followed by deployment overseas where you served with distinction in multiple combat operations. Your shooting scores throughout your military career have been consistently above average, though nothing in your official records suggests the level of precision you demonstrated this morning. I've continued training and equipment refinement during my off-duty time," Sarah explained. "The military provides excellent foundational instruction, but there's always room for individual improvement through additional practice and study." "Individual improvement," Thompson repeated, his tone suggesting skepticism about the completeness of her explanation. "The shots you made today, particularly under those wind conditions, suggest training and experience that goes beyond what someone could typically achieve through self-directed practice alone. Sarah recognized that Thompson was probing for information about her background that might not appear in official military records. His questions indicated familiarity with advanced marksmanship that suggested personal experience beyond typical instructor qualifications. "My family has a tradition of precision shooting that goes back several generations," she said carefully. "I learned fundamental techniques from my grandfather before I ever enlisted in the military." Thompson's expression shifted slightly, indicating that her answer had provided information he had been seeking. "Your grandfather? Would that be Chun Wei, formerly of the Chinese military?" The question caught Sarah off guard, revealing that Thompson possessed knowledge about her family history that definitely would not appear in standard personnel files. Her grandfather's background was something she had never discussed with military authorities, partly because it had never seemed relevant and partly because it involved complications that were difficult to explain in official contexts. "Yes, Master Sergeant," she replied, recognizing that attempting to deflect or minimize would likely prove counterproductive given Thompson's apparent level of information. "Chun Wei served as a sniper instructor in the People's Liberation Army before immigrating to the United States in the 1980s, Thompson continued, consulting notes that suggested extensive research into her family background. He was reportedly involved in developing advanced training techniques and equipment modifications that exceeded standard military protocols of that era. Sarah waited for Thompson to continue, uncertain about the direction the conversation was heading, but recognizing that her responses could significantly impact her standing in the program. "The markings on your rifle stock," Thompson said, shifting his attention to a different aspect of their discussion. "They're not decorative elements, are they? They represent specific achievements or certifications within a training system that most people wouldn't recognize." "They represent milestones in my grandfather's instruction," Sarah admitted, realizing that Thompson's knowledge made further deflection pointless. "Each symbol corresponds to specific skills and achievements that he considered important for precision shooting." Thompson nodded slowly, his expression indicating satisfaction with her honesty. Chun Wei was known for developing training methods that produced marksmen with capabilities that exceeded conventional military standards. "The fact that you received instruction in those methods explains your performance this morning. Is this going to be a problem for my continuation in the program?" Sarah asked directly, recognizing that Thompson's investigation into her background suggested concerns about her suitability for standard military training. "That depends on several factors," Thompson replied, closing the file folder and leaning back in his chair. "Your shooting abilities clearly exceed those of other recruits, which could create challenges for standard group instruction methods. More significantly, the training you received from your grandfather may have included techniques or approaches that conflict with military protocols we're required to teach." Sarah considered his statement carefully before responding. "I'm here to learn military sniper techniques and procedures, Master Sergeant. My previous training provides a foundation, but I understand that military operations require specific approaches that may differ from civilian or foreign military methods." "That's exactly the right answer," Thompson said, his tone indicating approval. "However, your capabilities raise questions about the most effective way to utilize your time and talents during this program. Standard instruction may be redundant for someone with your background, while advanced techniques might be more appropriate." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, covering Sarah's family history, her personal training background, and Thompson's assessment of her potential role within the sniper program. By the time she left his office, Sarah understood that her exceptional performance had created both opportunities and complications that would shape her experience for the remainder of the training. Returning to the barracks, she found most recruits engaged in evening maintenance activities or informal socializing. Rodriguez approached as she began her own equipment checks, his expression indicating curiosity about her extended absence. "Long meeting with Thompson," he observed. "Everything okay?" "Just discussing training approaches," Sarah replied honestly, though without elaborating on the specific details that had been covered. "Must have been some discussion," Rodriguez continued. Word is that Thompson doesn't usually spend that much time with individual recruits unless there's either a problem or something special going on. Sarah finished her equipment inspection before responding. I think he's just trying to understand everyone's background and capabilities so he can provide appropriate instruction. The explanation seemed to satisfy Rodriguez, though Sarah noticed him exchanging glances with several other recruits who had apparently been discussing her absence and its potential significance. She expected that her shooting performance and subsequent private meeting with Thompson would generate ongoing speculation and attention from her fellow trainees. As the barracks settled into evening quiet time, Sarah reflected on the day's events and their implications for the weeks ahead. Her exceptional performance had achieved its intended goal of demonstrating her capabilities, but it had also revealed family connections and training background that might complicate her integration into standard military instruction protocols. The markings on her rifle represented more than family tradition or personal achievement. They embodied a legacy of precision and dedication that stretched across generations and cultures, connecting her to training methods and techniques that few people in the world truly understood. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities to prove that this legacy could enhance rather than conflict with her service as a military snipe. The test of heritage. The second week of training brought challenges that separated the truly committed from those who had underestimated the program's demands. 3 recruits had already been dismissed, their inability to meet minimum standards becoming apparent during the rigorous physical and mental evaluations that followed the initial shooting assessment. The remaining 44 students found themselves pushed to their limits daily, with each new exercise designed to reveal weaknesses that might prove fatal in operational environments. Sarah had settled into a routine that balanced excellence with discretion. Her performance remained consistently superior without being so dramatically exceptional that it disrupted group dynamics or created additional scrutiny from instructors. She helped struggling classmates, when appropriate, share techniques that could benefit others, and maintain the kind of professional demeanor that earned respect without generating resentment. The training schedule intensified as recruits moved beyond basic marksmanship into advanced techniques. Stalking exercises required them to move undetected across varied terrain while carrying full equipment loads. Observation drills tested their ability to identify and catalog targets under stress conditions. Mathematical calculations became more complex as students learned to account for multiple environmental variables affecting long-range shots. It was during a particularly challenging stalking exercise that Sarah's heritage training first created noticeable tension with official military doctrine. The exercise required recruits to advance across 2 miles of wooded terrain, establish concealed firing positions, and engage targets without being detected by opposing forces equipped with advanced surveillance equipment. Most recruits followed the movement techniques taught in their preliminary classes, using established military protocols for camouflage and concealment. Sarah instinctively employed methods her grandfather had taught her, drawing from Chinese military traditions that emphasize different approaches to terrain analysis and movement patterns. Her route selection and positioning techniques proved dramatically more effective than those used by other recruits. While her classmates struggled to remain undetected during their approach movements, Sarah reached her firing position 30 minutes ahead of schedule without triggering any of the surveillance systems designed to identify advancing marksmen. The target engagement itself presented another opportunity for her heritage training to distinguish itself. Standard military procedure called for specific shot placement and follow-up protocols that prioritized rapid target neutralization. Sarah's grandfather had taught her techniques that emphasized precision over speed, ensuring that single shots would achieve desired effects without requiring additional ammunition expenditure. Her performance during the exercise was flawless, completing all objectives while remaining completely undetected by opposing forces. However, her success came at the cost of raising questions about the methods she had employed to achieve such exceptional results. Master Sergeant Thompson called her aside immediately following the exercise conclusion. His expression indicated recognition that her performance had exceeded what should have been possible using standard military techniques. "Outstanding work out there," Thompson began, his tone carefully neutral. "Your approach to terrain analysis and route selection was particularly impressive. Mind sharing where you learned those specific techniques?" Sarah recognized the underlying question in his inquiry. Thompson was asking whether she had used non-military training methods that might not be appropriate for military operations. "Some of the movement principles came from my grandfather's instruction," she admitted. He emphasized different approaches to concealment and positioning that seemed to complement standard military techniques. Thompson nodded slowly, his expression indicating that her answer had confirmed suspicions he had already formed. "The problem is that your grandfather's techniques, while clearly effective, weren't developed within American military doctrine. That creates complications for both instruction and evaluation purposes." "How so, Master Sergeant?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious about the institutional concerns her performance might be raising. "Military training is designed to produce predictable results using standardized methods," Thompson explained. "When someone demonstrates capabilities that exceed those standards through non-standard training, it raises questions about integration with conventional forces and compatibility with established operational procedures." Sarah considered his explanation while watching other recruits complete their debriefing processes nearby. Most appeared exhausted and frustrated by the exercise's demands, their unsuccessful attempts to remain undetected having resulted in early termination and remedial instruction assignments. "Are you suggesting that I should limit my performance to standard military levels?" she asked. "I'm suggesting that we need to find ways to channel your exceptional abilities in directions that enhance rather than complicate your integration into military sniper operations," Thompson replied. "That may require some adjustments to your training program." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, the officer responsible for overall program administration. His presence during individual recruit discussions was unusual, suggesting that Sarah's performance had attracted attention at higher levels of command. "Master Sergeant Thompson, could I speak with you and Recruit Chin privately?" Harrison requested, his tone indicating that this was more directive than question. They followed Harrison to a nearby administrative building, where he led them into a conference room equipped with secure communication equipment and classified material storage facilities. The formal setting suggested that whatever discussion was about to occur had implications beyond routine training matters. "Recruit Chun," Harrison began after ensuring the room was properly secured. "Your performance over the past 2 weeks has been exceptional by any standard. However, it's also raised questions about your training background that require clarification for security and operational purposes." Sarah maintained her composure while recognizing that this conversation could significantly impact her military career beyond just sniper school completion. "What kind of clarification do you need, sir?" "Your grandfather's background in Chinese military service included involvement in programs that developed advanced training techniques, some of which were classified at levels that make information sharing problematic," Harrison explained. "We need to understand exactly what training you received and whether it included access to classified methodologies that shouldn't be integrated into American military operations." The question revealed complexities in her family history that Sarah had hoped would remain private. Her grandfather's service in the Chinese military had indeed included involvement in specialized programs, though the extent and nature of his knowledge had always been something he discussed carefully and selectively. "My grandfather taught me shooting techniques and tactical principles, but he was always careful to avoid sharing information that might be considered sensitive or inappropriate," Sarah replied. "His instruction focused on fundamental skills and personal development rather than operational procedures or classified methodologies." Harrison exchanged glances with Thompson before continuing. "The techniques you demonstrated during the stalking exercise suggest training that goes beyond fundamental skills. Some of your movement patterns and Positioning choices indicate knowledge of advanced surveillance countermeasures that aren't typically available through civilian or basic military training. Sarah realized that her instinctive application of her grandfather's teaching had revealed more about her background than she had intended. The methods that felt natural to her apparently stood out as sophisticated to observers familiar with standard military approaches. My grandfather did teach me about surveillance and counter-surveillance, she admitted, but he presented those lessons as general security awareness rather than specific military techniques. General security awareness that happened to include highly effective methods for defeating modern surveillance systems, Harrison observed. The equipment you evaded today represents current military technology designed to detect even well-trained opposing forces. The conversation continued for another hour, covering various aspects of Sarah's training background and her grandfather's history in ways that revealed official knowledge of his service that extended far beyond what she had expected. It became clear that her family's background had been investigated thoroughly, raising questions about whether her enlistment and subsequent training assignments had been subject to special scrutiny from the beginning. Eventually, Harrison reached what appeared to be the purpose of the extended discussion. Recruit Chun, your capabilities clearly exceed those required for standard sniper operations. The question is whether those capabilities should be developed through conventional military channels or whether they suggest suitability for more specialized assignments. What kind of specialized assignments? Sarah asked, recognizing that her answer might determine the direction of her entire military career. Assignments that would utilize your unique training background and exceptional abilities in ways that serve military objectives while addressing security concerns about non-standard training methodologies, Harrison replied. However, such assignments would require additional security clearances and specialized instruction that goes beyond standard sniper school curriculum. Sarah found herself facing a decision that she had never anticipated. Her goal had been to complete sniper training and serve as a precision marksman in conventional military operations. The suggestion that her background made her suitable for more specialized roles opened possibilities that were simultaneously appealing and concerning. What would happen to my current training if I were selected for specialized assignments? She asked. You would continue with modified instruction that addresses both conventional sniper skills and additional capabilities that might be required for specialized operations, Thompson interjected. However, this would also mean separation from your current training class and integration into a different program with additional requirements and restrictions. Sarah understood that accepting specialized assignment consideration would fundamentally change her military experience. It would provide opportunities to fully utilize her capabilities while potentially isolating her from the conventional military career she had originally envisioned. I'd like to continue with conventional sniper training, she said after careful consideration. My goal is to serve as a military marksman, and I believe that goal can be achieved through the standard program with appropriate adjustment for my background. Harrison nodded, his expression indicating that her answer had been expected and was considered acceptable. Very well. However, your training will need to include additional components that address integration of your non-standard capabilities with conventional military procedures. Master Sergeant Thompson will work with you to develop modified instruction that serves both your development and program requirements. After the meeting concluded and Sarah returned to the barracks, she found herself reflecting on the implications of her family heritage for her military service. Her grandfather's training had provided her with exceptional capabilities, but it had also created complications that required careful navigation to avoid compromising her career objectives. Rodriguez was waiting when she entered the barracks, his expression indicating curiosity about her extended absence. Several other recruits also seemed interested in her return, though most tried to appear casually engaged in other activities. Another long meeting, Rodriguez observed. Starting to think you're getting some kind of special treatment around here. Just working through training adjustments, Sarah replied, recognizing that her repeated private meetings with instructors were generating speculation among her classmates. Training adjustments, Rodriguez repeated. That's one way to put it. Word is that you're being considered for some kind of accelerated program or special assignment. Sarah realized that rumors about her status were circulating among the recruits, potentially creating social dynamics that could complicate her remaining time in the program. Her exceptional performance and meetings with senior officers had apparently generated theories about her true purpose in attending sniper school. "I'm here for the same reason everyone else is," she said firmly. "To learn military sniper techniques and earn assignment to operational units." The assertion seemed to satisfy Rodriguez, though Sarah noticed him exchanging glances with other recruits who had been listening to their conversation. She expected that speculation about her background and status would continue regardless of her explanations. Training resumed the following morning with classroom instruction covering advanced ballistic calculations and environmental analysis techniques. Sarah found the material interesting but familiar, most of it covering principles that her grandfather had taught her using different mathematical approaches and terminology. During the afternoon shooting exercise, she was paired with Rodriguez for a team-based target engagement scenario. The exercise required them to coordinate their shots to simultaneously neutralize multiple targets positioned at varying distances and elevations. Rodriguez proved to be a competent marksman with solid technical skills, though his approach to target analysis and shot planning differed significantly from methods that felt natural to Sarah. Their coordination required compromise and communication as they worked to synchronize their techniques. "You calculate windage differently than they taught us in class," Rodriguez observed as they prepared for their assigned targets. "Different approach, same result," Sarah replied, making adjustments to her scope settings based on environmental conditions she had observed. "Your approach seems more complicated," Rodriguez continued. "Why not just use the standard military calculations they taught us?" Sarah paused in her preparations, recognizing that her answer could reveal more about her background than might be appropriate. Sometimes more detailed analysis produces better results, especially under challenging conditions. "More detailed analysis," Rodriguez repeated. "You mean the techniques your grandfather taught you?" The statement caught Sarah off guard, indicating that rumors about her family background had become common knowledge among the recruits. She wasn't sure how much information was circulating or how accurate it might be. "What have you heard about my grandfather?" she asked directly. "That he was some kind of Chinese military instructor who taught you special shooting techniques," Rodriguez replied. "That's why you're so much better than everyone else, and why you keep having private meetings with Thompson and the other officers." Sarah realized that speculation among the recruits had evolved into assumptions about her background that were both partially accurate and potentially problematic. If rumors about her grandfather's military service became widespread, it might create additional complications with official scrutiny and security investigations. "My grandfather taught me to shoot," she said carefully. "Beyond that, most of what people are saying is probably speculation and exaggeration." Rodriguez nodded, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced by her explanation. "Well, whatever he taught you, it's working. Your shooting yesterday was incredible." They completed the target engagement exercise successfully, their coordinated shots neutralizing all assigned targets within the specified time constraints. However, Sarah's performance continued to exceed expectations in ways that drew attention from instructors and speculation from fellow recruits. The pattern continued over the following weeks. Each new exercise revealed aspects of her training that distinguished her from other students, while also raising questions about the appropriate integration of her capabilities with standard military procedures. Her heritage training provided advantages that were undeniable, but also complicated her efforts to blend seamlessly into conventional military instruction. 3 more recruits were dismissed during the 4th week, their inability to meet evolving standards becoming apparent as training intensified. The remaining 41 students found themselves subjected to increasingly demanding exercises designed to simulate combat stress conditions and evaluate their psychological resilience under extreme pressure. Sarah's performance remained consistently superior, But she also began developing strategies for supporting her fellow recruits without making her assistance too obvious. She shared techniques that could help others improve their capabilities while being careful not to reveal training methods that might be considered inappropriate or sensitive. Rodriguez had become something of an unofficial leader among the recruits, his natural charisma and solid performance earning him respect from classmates and instructors. Sarah found herself frequently paired with him for team exercises, their complementary skills making them an effective partnership despite their different backgrounds and training approaches. You know, Rodriguez said one evening as they cleaned their rifles following a particularly challenging day of training, "I've been thinking about what you said regarding your grandfather's instruction." Sarah looked up from her weapon maintenance, recognizing that Rodriguez had been developing theories about her background that he was preparing to share. "I think your grandfather taught you more than just shooting," Rodriguez continued. "Some of the stuff you do, the way you analyze terrain and movement patterns, it's like you learn tactical thinking that goes way beyond what most people pick up from hunting or target shooting." His observation was accurate, though Sarah wasn't sure how to respond without either confirming sensitive details about her training or dismissing legitimate insights he had developed through working with her. "My grandfather believed that good shooting required understanding of many different factors," she said carefully. "He taught me to think about marksmanship as part of larger tactical situations." "Tactical situations," Rodriguez repeated, "like military operations." "Like any situation where precision shooting might be required," Sarah corrected, though she recognized that her distinction might not be particularly meaningful given the context of their current training. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. "Makes sense. Military training tends to compartmentalize different skills, but real-world situations probably require more integrated thinking." Sarah found his analysis insightful and appreciated his apparent understanding that her background provided different perspectives on common challenges. Their conversation was interrupted by Master Sergeant Thompson's announcement that the class would be undertaking their most demanding exercise to date. "Tomorrow you will begin a 5-day field training exercise that will test every skill you have developed during your time here," Thompson announced. "You will be required to operate independently in hostile territory, gather intelligence on assigned targets, and demonstrate precision engagement capabilities under conditions designed to replicate actual combat operations." The exercise